And welcome to Dream, where we are focused on connecting to and building community. We are committed to helping individuals break cycles. We are delighted that you have taken the opportunity to join us. So prepare yourselves for this week's teaching and equipping session. Get ready to be educated, equipped, and set free as you listen to this week's broadcast. And thank you for joining us.
Good morning or good afternoon, good evening. I'm just all confused on a Tuesday afternoon. I wanted to come to you guys for True Tuesday this week. Normally we have Apostle Deborah Edwards, who comes and does our True Tuesday sessions, and she is on fire, honey. The past couple of Tuesdays have been excellent. And she asked if I would stand in this Tuesday for her. So I told her absolutely. Absolutely. Because when I come, I got some words for you. So today we're going to go with God has a plan for us. Interesting enough, if you've been watching Dream for the past couple of weeks, or at least the past week, you found out that our family has been going through quite a troublesome time here. We had several deaths in the family here recently. And so everybody is dealing with the stages of grief. Here at Dream, we teach on stages of grief, but it is also something that we have to learn. We become students ourselves as we begin to go through life and we go through the grieving stage. And so this past week, we were preparing for one of the funerals of someone who was very close and dear to my heart, my sister-in-law. And as I was preparing for that, I just had a rough night, Saturday night, after the visitation. And then Sunday morning, I had a dream. And so when I woke up Sunday morning, before I could even open my eyes, I heard God has a plan for us. God has a plan for us. And so I woke up and I immediately called Apostle and I said, Apostle, listen, this is the dream I had. And then here is the words that I heard. God has a plan for us. And so being Apostle, being who she is, she's always a teacher first. The first thing she says is, what do you think the dream means? What do you think those words mean? God has a plan for us. What do you think he was saying to you? A plan for what? Have you prayed about it? That is always her. She's always going to go there because she's teaching us to use your own gift. If every time I went to her, she told me what she thought God was saying to me, I would no longer need to go to God. I would just go straight to her and ask her, what do you think God is trying to say to me? And so what she encourages us is to have your own relationship. Have your own ear. Learn to interpret and listen to what God is saying to you so that you can understand it and you don't have to rely on me and make me your God, because that is what I do not want. She does not want us to make her our God. So as she and I began to talk about the dream, she said, okay, and it was time to get ready for the funeral. So I did get up. I went to my husband and my brother. One of my brothers was staying with me for the funeral. Then I told him and my sons and my brother, hey, this is the dream I had. Here are the words I heard. God has a plan for us. And so my brother was like, that's a dope dream. And that's a dope message. I'm going to keep that all day, right? And so as we are sitting in the church in the funeral, the pastor gets up and he goes ahead and he ministers. And then he says to my brother, God has a plan for us. And the brother who's sitting next to me, who was staying with me, immediately looks at me and went, oh! So I just looked at him and fell out laughing at the funeral because he's so funny to me. But he was like, isn't it interesting how God just confirmed that thing? I love how this happens. And all week long, I've been hearing that same thing. God has a plan for us. God has a plan for us. God has a purpose for us. God has a plan. And I said, okay, God, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. I wanted to go ahead and teach this message tonight because so often when we are going through good times and we're celebrating and we're rejoicing and things are going well and you're getting all the benefits and you're reaping harvest, it always feels good and you're thinking God has a plan, this is great. But what about in those times where things don't go according to plan? What about in those hard times? In those times where you're wailing and you're crying? What about in those times where you're weeping? What about in those times where you're trying and you're trying and you're trying and nothing's working out right? See, if the only time we talk about the purpose and the plan of God is during good times, when you go through bad times, you automatically assume it's the devil, it's the enemy, the adversary is against me, Satan doesn't want me to accomplish things, and you start bucking up against what may be God in your life. God is showing up with his plan, that his plan may be in this season, it's going to be a little rough. In this season, you're going to cry. In this season, it's not going to feel good, but it's still a part of my plan. And so we need to teach messages like this so that you get that understanding that although it doesn't feel right in this moment right now, it's still a part of God's plan. It's still a part of God's plan. So I'm going to go to Exodus, and I want you guys to go with me. We're going to do Exodus 1 and 2, chapter 1 and chapter 2, because this is important for us as we begin to teach on the plan of God. The plan of God. Exodus 1. In Exodus 1, we are seeing that the Israelites are taken into captive in Egypt. That Pharaoh has decided, and this is long after Joseph. Pharaoh knows nothing about Joseph or anything that happened. He has gone on. His brothers have gone on. This is years later. And so we are finding that the Israelites have grown. They have given birth. They are more than the number of stars in the sky, which was the promise that was originally given beforehand. And so we're seeing that this has happened. The Israelites have become fruitful and they've multiplied. And so with that multiplication, Pharaoh said, you know what? If they join with our enemies, they could take us out. So we've got to oppress these people. We've got to keep them under wraps. And so what he started to do was give them hard labor, give them difficult work, make them work the field, the job that the Egyptians did not want to do. Pharaoh then made the Israelites now do that job. This was their responsibility. And he wanted to impress them or oppress them so much that they would not be able to rise up or get up. And sometimes that is part of the pressure that comes around us when you feel oppressed to the point where you feel that you can't get up. I can't keep moving. I can't go on. God, this is a really difficult time. You have no idea what I'm going through. And if you understood the level of pain or frustration or depression or stress that I'm under, you would understand I can't move. Well, this is what the children of Israel were going through at that time. They were just oppressed to the point where there was no way out. We didn't see any way out. We didn't see that we could overcome. They weren't even thinking of conquering Pharaoh. It was just beatings every day. And then on top of that, Pharaoh became nervous or anxious about the males of the Israelites because the males were stronger than the females. They were bigger. And the fear was that if all the men would gather together, there's something in that. If all the men would gather together, they could come against Pharaoh. So what he started saying was, listen, we need to kill off the male seed. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. We need to kill off the male seed. We need to make sure that the male seed does not get to make it to adulthood. So originally what he did was he went to the midwives, and he said, listen, I need you, when the Israelite women are birthing babies and you see that it is a male child, I need you to kill that male child. If it's a female child, you can let her live. But if it's a male child, you kill them at birth. And the midwives determined, we fear God more. We fear God more. So I'm sorry, Pharaoh, we ain't gonna be able to do this. And no, they did not say that to them, but that's what they felt in their heart. We won't do this. And I would rather lie to Pharaoh and tell him that, these Israelite women, they're nothing like, the Egyptian women. They give birth and it happens quickly. It happens fast, sometimes before we get there. So that's the reason why all these male seeds keep coming in, because when we get there, the babies are already out. And so Pharaoh then got very upset. And so then in verse 22, it says, then Pharaoh gave the order to all his people, every Hebrew boy that is born, you must throw them into the Nile, but let every girl live. So that meant throw them into the Nile, let's kill them, and let's let every girl live. Now, so often when we read this story, although we understand that part, we usually skip over that part and go right into chapter 2, which talks about Moses' birth. But I want to stay there for a minute, because what about the babies that were not Moses? What about the male sons that were actually thrown into the Nile? What about the weeping mothers who were crying for their babies that they birthed, that they carried for 9 months? They went through the pains of labor, had desires for their lives, and wanted to see them get married, only for their children to die. What about that part? Because we often want to go to the next chapter. We want to get to the happy part where Moses is born and everything is okay. But there was a part before Moses where things were not okay. There were a part, and even during the birth of Moses, but before him, there was a part where it wasn't okay. I think those mothers were not mentioned. The number of babies that were murdered was not mentioned. We don't hear about that too much. We don't hear how many was it. We've never heard any stories about them because they're left out of the Bible. But there were babies. There were babies, and there were babies that did not make it. What about the hard part? Was this not a part of God's plan? I want to believe that we serve a God that always plans for good things, for rainbows and sunshines. I want to believe that we serve a God who would never let anything bad happen to us or never let us experience a negative time in our lives. But what happens when that is exactly what happens? When that is part of the plan? To get you to the next level, you have to go through a little bit of the pain. You have to go through the frustration. You got to go through the heartache. You have to go through the divorce. You have to go through the miscarriage. You have to go through the job that let you go. You have to go through the business that failed. You have to go through the bankruptcy. You have to go through losing finances. You got to go through that child who's just rebellious. You've got to go through that trying time in your life. You've got to go through the loss of a loved one. You have to go through it because that is a part of the plan. And what happens when you get through that situation, God still has you when you're going to it. God is still the same God who's got you while you're going through it. And God is still going to be there when you come out of it. But it's still a part of the process. Not every bad thing that happens to you in life is the adversary or the enemy. Some of it is just the plan of God for your life, and there is purpose for it. Even when I'm going through and I'm experiencing hard time, my prayer is, God, even this you'll get the glory from. Even this situation, this hard time, this trial, this thing that just feels so overwhelming to me, you will get the glory from even this situation in my life. Let your name be glorified. Even now, I'll still praise and worship you. But it took a long time for me to get to this place, y'all. Because sometimes when I would get to that hard time, I would want to crumble inside of myself and just break down and cry. God had to strengthen me in certain areas so that I learned to praise my way through. See, the Bible also talks about David and how after a battle, a successful battle, they go back to the place that they're living, and all of their wives have been taken, their children have been taken, the soldiers, all of their families have been taken, all of their gold and their silver, everything that they had, their possessions, all had been taken. And the soldiers were so mad at David that they wanted to kill him. I just want to kill you, David, that I have to go through this situation. I am so angry at you that I'm going through this. And David had to get to a place where he separated himself from everybody, and he had to go pray because even his wife had been taken. And so he had to get to a place where he went away from everybody else to go pray, and he just began to worship God. I'm just going to praise you, God, in the midst of this. I don't know what your plan is for our lives, but I need you to let me know. Do I pursue the enemy and take this back? Do I pursue the enemy? And then when we look at the story of Job and how Job went through everything that he went through, how God allowed the enemy to come in, the adversary, and take from Job. How he allowed his children to be murdered. His wife cursed him out. His friends turned their backs on him and was talking to him and telling him, you must did something. For God to do this to you, you had to do something. It was you. Yeah, this is all you. This is nobody else can take the blame for this. You must have sinned. That's what happened. You sinned. He lost all of his possessions. The enemy attacked him. I mean, he couldn't even get over one thing before hearing another thing came, and then began to attack his body. And begin to attack how the words that were coming after him, the words that were coming to him. His wife is saying, curse your God and just die. To me, that's an attack of the mind because I want to challenge the way you're thinking. The enemy knew that if I take him down in this place, in this area, that he would then curse God. That was the expectation, for you to curse God and you to say, for me to be able to prove to God, you weren't so holy after all. Then afterwards, God gives Job double what he had before. But he had to go through it. And that's the message for today, saints. This is the message that I'm wanting to get to you. I want to get to you sometimes the pain and the pressure and the buildup is all purposed for you. It's part of God's plan for your life. And if you don't gather that, if you don't get that, if you don't grasp that, when you go through challenging times, you will buck up against God. You will buck up and begin to rebuke God and the plan that he has for you, which will cause you to be in disobedience and out of order. You won't be lining up with what God's plan is for you. You'll be following the enemy thinking that way is lighter and easier. You will be in your Job moment cursing God instead of in your Job moment praising God. Worshiping God. God, I'm still going to praise you in the midst of the storm. God, I'm still going to praise you regardless to what's going on around me. God, I'm still going to lift you up and give you praise regardless to what's coming at me. I'm still going to worship you. But y'all, that takes some challenges. You've got to go through. And I told you, this wasn't always where I was. God had to mature my Christian walk to get me to a point where I am here, where I can say, you know what? In the midst of this, God is still going to get the glory. That means Kai had to go through some stuff because she had to grow up. Instead of falling on the floor and crying, I had to grow up. God, I don't know what you're planning, but I trust you. God, I don't know how you're going to do this, but I trust you. Do you trust God? Do you trust God? Or is your relationship with God based on what God can do for you? God, I only trust you when your plan goes according to my plan. When I can dictate to you what I want and you give me that the way I want it, that's the only time I trust you. But the second you start doing something that I wouldn't have done it this way. I don't know why we're over here. The second you take me out of my comfort zone, I no longer trust you. What is your message to God? What are you saying to him? What are your actions saying? Not just the words coming out of your mouth, but do your actions show that you truly trust him? That you trust the plan that he has for your life? Or is it only in sunshine and good times, I trust you, God? But if it's not sunshine and good times, I don't. That's what we're seeing here at the end of Exodus. That Pharaoh has said, you know what? Now all male babies, they got to die. I'm coming for your seed. The seed that can procreate and reproduce. The men had a purpose in the household. They had a purpose to lead the family, to build the family, to instruct the sons and daughters, to assign discipline. They have a role to lead their children to Christ. They have a role in the household in order to keep the family together, to keep and ward off the enemy. That was what the man was for. And so in this story, Pharaoh decides, I'm going to kill all men. Anything that can come against me, I'm killing it. I may not be afraid of your women as much as I am your men. And so I'm trying to kill that out. And the enemy is still doing that today. Still using the same tactics to tear families apart, to get husbands and wives operating on different wavelengths. Y'all not even communicating together. We not even on the same wavelength, which means there's division in the household. And so as long as the enemy can keep you both divided in your own corners, we're not even coming together and praying against the enemy. I'm going to keep you both divided. He can come in and run ransack all through your house. Your children are easy targets at that point. Because I understand mom and dad don't even talk to each other. And what does that look like to the child? What does marriage look like to them? Is it dysfunction? Is it chaos and craziness? Is it constant arguing? Is it constant ridicule? Is it dad tearing down mom every time we turn around? Is dad calling mom out of her name? Is that what I'm seeing when I look at you and I see relationship? Has the enemy been able to come into your house and divide you to that extent? He's still doing the same thing. Think it not strange, this new abortion policy that just got passed. And now we are seeing women in an uproar because now they're trying to tell us what to do with our bodies. And so now I have a problem with this. You trying to tell me I can't get abortion. So now my stance is, in my church, we believe in women's rights. So we're going to encourage you to go out and get an abortion. How that makes sense? Don't worry, I'll wait. How that makes sense? And everybody who's arguing for is arguing the extent, like to the extent. What if the baby has something seriously wrong with the baby? Like medically, the baby can die and mom can die. What if both of them have this serious issue, and if she doesn't get the abortion, mom and baby are both going to die anyway? How many abortions take place where that's the extent? Like that's the reason behind it. Or are we seeing more abortions take place because I'm just not ready to be a mom? Yeah, this is my 6th abortion. Not to knock anybody down, but just to make you think about it. Think about it. Let's discuss. Is that what we're seeing? Is that what we're seeing? Still happening today. I want to take the seed, and we understand that in each one of us, there is a purpose and a gift. What if you are aborting the Moses of this generation? What if you're aborting the one who's going to help turn things around for this generation? The one that's going to lead the revival for people going back to Christ. What if that's the baby that you're aborting? What if you're aborting the baby that's going to cure something that we need a cure for? What if that's what we're doing? I don't know. You can't argue to me that I believe God and I lean on God and I have faith in God, but at the same time argue, but I don't. In this situation, I don't. I don't trust in God. I don't believe. And I know that's a tricky one for people because sometimes we get on the fence in Christianity. And today I'm going to tip my toe on the left side of the fence. And tomorrow I'm going to tip my toe more on the right side. And maybe I believe more on the left side today. And maybe tomorrow I'm going to be more on the right side. Lukewarm Christians. That's what we are. Lukewarm Christians. Depending on my belief, not what's in the Bible, but what I feel in the moment and the argument that somebody gives to me in the moment, I'm going to speak up on what I think. What I think without going to God and going, but God, is this you? Is this your plan? Is this your plan? Or are we still talking about our own initiatives and our own agendas and our own plans? What feels good to me on my inside? What makes me tingle? I know in the Bible it say, don't do this, but today I want to do it. So I'm just going to repent for it when I finish. Still talking about God's plan. I know. Still talking about God's plan. But because his plan doesn't line up with my agenda, God, hold on for a second. Let me put you on the back burner until I finish doing what it is I want to do. And then when I finish what I want to do, I then want to pull God back in. Or when I put myself in a position or a predicament that's too hard for me to carry or bear, or a burden that's too heavy for me to continue with, when I put myself in a position where I can't get myself out of it, then all of a sudden I want to go, okay, God, now take over. Pop out like a magic genie and make this work for me. No, that ain't how God works. That's not how God works. We're still talking about God's plan. Even in this, even in your own agenda, does it line up with the plan of God? Or does your own agenda line up with what you want and what you need? I'm going to get what I want. So I don't care if God does not agree with it in this moment. Because so often in church, we preach that, listen, you can ask God for forgiveness. God will forgive you for all your sins. But what if I keep committing the same sin day after day, moment after moment, and I just keep repenting afterwards? I lay down to sleep with Joe, and God, I'm sorry. I lay down to sleep with Tom. God, I'm sorry. I lay down to sleep with Bob. God, I'm sorry. At what point does God go, you know what? You a hot mess, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. Are the words that you're speaking out of your mouth, you're going to be accountable for those words. So does my words not line up with the word of God? When I'm in church and I'm with my church friends, my church words are this. But when I'm home and I'm with my home girls who not in church, my words are different. My actions are different. My deeds are different. And it's not lining up with the word of God because I'm still working and operating in my own agenda. I'll be accountable for that in the end. All of us will have to stand before God. All of us. All of us will have to stand before judgment. And all of us will have to take an account for everything you did. And you're either going to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant, or you're going to hear, depart from me. And depart from me is not I go to hell for a few weeks or a few days, but I can get out of hell free card. There is no get out of hell free. There is no get out of hell. It's you stay there. I told myself earlier this week, I said, you really need to start looking at things differently. And I'm going to tell you guys what I determined you need to look at things like this situation I'm getting ready to do, this word I'm getting ready to speak, whatever it is in your life, that thing you're getting ready to do, is it worth me waking up in hell for? That will cause you to think differently about some things you do. Before you get out the car, before you answer that call that's about to come through, before you fight that girl, if I die right now, is this worth me going to hell for? No. There's nothing I can think of that's worth me going to hell. I can't think of nothing. There's nothing that I can think of where I go, yeah, I'll go to hell for that. No, nothing. Because that may be the thing that keeps you from doing what you know you ain't got no business doing, if we're being honest. It's thinking that if I do this, I could go to hell. Is this worth me going to hell though? No. We're still talking about God's plan. So let's go ahead and let's go to Exodus 2. Exodus 2. So we see that now, Exodus 2 and 1. Now, a man from the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months, which means I saw that he had no blemishes, he had no issues, he had no impediments, he was not handicapped in any kind of way, any handicap capable. There was no problem with him. So he was a fine child, which means he was a healthy child from what I could see on the outside. She hid him for 3 months. But when she could not hide him no more, she got a paper basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Now, what I want you guys to know is, first of all, she did not hear from God. It does not say in that scripture anywhere that she heard from God or she saw an angel and the angel said, your baby's going to live. Here's what you do. Here's the game plan. Here is the plan that God has for him. She saw none of this. None of it. All she knew was that male childs were being murdered. They were being put in the Nile, and she took care of this child up until the point she could take care of him. And when she realized the child was getting too big to hide him anymore, she decided, this is what I'm going to do. This is what's going to happen. There comes a point where in God's plan, we have to move on faith. Where we have to move on faith. God, I understand what your plan is for me, but God needs you to put your faith with your belief. And that's what she did. She took this baby. She didn't know what was going to happen when she put him in the water. She may have hoped somebody would get him. But what's the likelihood that somebody would take this child from her and they will raise this baby? That they will take this Israelite child and raise this child at a time when these babies were being murdered. What's the likelihood that that would happen? She didn't know. That baby could have been ate by an alligator. Somebody could have found the baby and just drowned it in the Nile because it's already at the river. I mean, it's already here. So we might as well just go ahead and finish this out. She didn't know what the outcome would be. She had no idea that Pharaoh's daughter would be down there bathing. Or that Pharaoh's daughter would see the baby and not go, oh, put him with the others. He has to be murdered. No idea. Sometimes in difficult seasons, and that's what I need you to get here, in this difficult season where babies are being murdered, she moved on faith. And her move on faith was according to what God's plan was for Moses' life. Although there were other children at the same time who were dying, other male children who were not making it, other male mothers who were crying because their babies did not make it, for Moses' life at that time, it was that he was going to live. Had she not put him in the basket, had she not put the basket and made it waterproof, which is why she put tar at the bottom, had she not done that, he could have drowned in the river. Had she not sent his sister to go along with it to speak to the princess when she pulled the baby out, she may not have been able to breastfeed her baby. See, in one season, you can be weeping and fearful, and in the next season, God shows up with this plan, and it be completely different and a turnaround from where you are. You just got to keep going. That's the thing. You've got to keep going. You've got to get up. You've got to keep moving. You can't get stuck where you are. You can't get stuck where you are. You can't allow yourself to get beat down to the point where you want to throw in the towel and just say, I quit. This is too much for me. This is too hard. The Bible says God will never put more on us than we can bear. The problem is, it doesn't say you won't put more on you than you can bear, that you won't become the weapon that's used against you. It says the enemy, there's no weapon that the enemy will form that can be used against you. But what about the weapons that you form? What about the things that you did that caused this to be more than you can bear? Sometimes the battle is not a spiritual battle because the enemy is doing it. Sometimes it's a battle that you have brought to yourself. Part of my prayer is, God, don't let me be a weapon wielded in the hand of the enemy against me. And don't let me be a weapon against me, one that I've created, that I'm using to beat my own dang on self with. Don't let that happen. God, stop me from stopping me. Stop me from stopping your plan in my life. Stop me from speaking out a curse on what you're trying to bless and coming into agreement with what the enemy is saying against me. Don't let those words fly out my mouth. A few months ago, I talked to you guys, my husband and my family and I, we all relocated to Chattanooga. And a few weeks, because my job moved me here. And a few weeks after we got here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the company called me and said, hey, we're doing a layoff and your position is being eliminated. And I mean, no more than maybe 2-3 weeks after we got here. Literally. In that moment when I got word of the layoff, we're new to Chattanooga. I don't know any companies here. I haven't even began to look for a position. But in that moment, with all that stress and that frustration, and we just moved here, and we've got bills to pay, and it's just this, and there's so much to think about, I knew that I couldn't allow my mouth to speak what was going on inside of me. I had to continue to speak praises to God until I felt like I could confidently say things without cursing myself. Because in that moment, the only thing I wanted to talk about was everything that was about to go wrong. Because this was not my plan for me. My plan, and according to what I felt like God was telling me to do, he told me to move here. I did it. I moved where you told me to, God. But you didn't tell me the door was going to close when I got here. You didn't tell me that part. You didn't tell me that there was going to be a mass layoff when I got here. That was not a part of the plan. Wow, God, really? So I'm going to get here and then they going to say, sorry, Your position is eliminated. Now imagine if I would have sat here and start crying and going, oh my goodness, everything is horrible. This is that and da. Coming into agreement and speaking out all those curses on my family and on myself. Imagine what would have happened instead of just putting on praise music and God, I'm going to just praise. Like right now, I don't even trust myself not to speak a curse against me. So I'm going to put on praise music and I'm just going to sing along. Because I don't even trust what may come out of me at this moment. But that took maturity. That meant I had to go through some things before I got to this point. And that's what I want you to get out of this message today. If you get nothing else out of this, I want you to get at least that point. And if only that point, only that point. God has a plan for you. He has a plan for all of us. Every single one of us. And there is nothing that happens in your life that God didn't already know was going to happen. Nothing catches him off guard. Nothing is a surprise to him. So that meant that God already knew about the divorce before the divorce happened. God already knew about the miscarriage before the miscarriage happened. God already knew about the foreclosure before the foreclosure happened. God already knew you were going to lose the car before it happened. There is nothing that happens in your life that God is going, well, where did that come from? Nothing at all. There is nothing that happens that he doesn't know. So in that, I can feel confident because I know it may have caught me by surprise, but God, I know it didn't catch you by surprise. And because I know it didn't catch you by surprise, then I believe that you had a plan for even this situation in my life. It was already predestined and pre-planned, which means you know what's going to happen next. So as I'm coming to this crossroad and I'm feeling like it's the end of the world, God, you already know what's next for me. You have a plan for even that. Even though I'm approaching this closed door and I keep getting told no matter what I do, God, you have a plan for this. So let me sit back and trust the plan. If you get nothing else, get that. God, I'm going to praise you until you move. Until you open this door. Until you do what you got to do next, God, I'm just going to continue to praise you. I'm just going to continue to worship you. I don't know how to make this right. What I envisioned, what I would have done in that situation and how I would have worked it out where I didn't lose my job or I didn't leave Cincinnati, God had a purpose and a plan instead for that. No, you got to leave Cincinnati and you got to go to Chattanooga. And there's still a plan for you there, even in Chattanooga. And I have another company for you. Don't worry about it. You won't even sweat. You won't be unemployed for a full week yet. Before I open the next door. Before I open the next door. Because God responds to your praise. He responds to your praise. So, family, I say this today. Don't forget, God has a plan for each and every one of us. And his plan may not look like your plan. It may not look like your agenda. It may not be the way you would have done it. It may not have been something that you would have coordinated. And in our limited imagination and our limited strategy and planning, I may think of what the next 3 moves may be, but I'm not thinking about all the consequences that could potentially happen that I don't even have visibility to down the line. I may be thinking I'm going to do this and this is going to fix this problem. But I don't realize 4 steps from now, something else completely different is going to happen. Nobody knew COVID was coming the way COVID came. We had no clue. 6 years ago, nobody knew it. And people were operating and moving how they thought they needed to move. And then it comes in. Sometimes that's what the storm looks like. It looks like something completely unexpected. It looks like something that you were not ready for, not geared up for, not planning for. And that's what the storm looks like. But in those moments, where is your faith? Is your faith in you? Is your faith in your spouse? Is your faith in God? Where is your faith? And if my faith is in my spouse, I hope you following God. What is God telling you? So, you guys, I want you to remember that if you got nothing else, that God has a plan for each and every one of us, and that it is our responsibility to follow God and to follow His plan. I pray that you guys had a wonderful Tuesday and a wonderful rest of the week. And I look forward to talking to you guys all again soon. God bless you.